Jesus. Judas is in the place of honor, to the left of Jesus, and Jesus shares the sop with him. And Peter is most likely down here at the lowest place on the totem pole. And one of the reasons for placing Peter there is that Peter signals to John to ask Jesus who it is that's going to betray him. And if Peter was up here, it would be impossible for him to signal easily to John. Okay, he's got to be in a place where his head is here and he's looking this way to easily catch John's attention. Okay, I think also Peter's reaction to the foot washing is going to suggest that he's in the lowest place as well, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so Jesus says that he was eating the Passover, so as I indicated, he's following the Essenic calendar. The man that the disciples were to find to lead them to the upper room was carrying a jar of water. Now, you ought to know that men don't carry jars of water in first century. That's a woman's job. Okay, and so the fact that he's carrying the jar of water indicates that he's probably celibate and part of a celibate community where there are no women to do the women's jobs, and so the guys have to do the women's jobs. Now, it's interesting that Luke uses the same word for upper room, guest room, that is used in Luke chapter 2, which says there is no room for them in the inn. And remember the pictures that I showed you of a typical kataluma, that it's a small side room off of a house that guests would stay in. It was not a Motel 8 or 6, okay? But this, obviously, is not an average house that's got a small kataluma. Here, the kataluma is on the second floor. It's a room big enough to seat 13 men and have a full meal, okay? So this suggests that probably either the community owned this large building, or there was a rich person who owned this and made it available to the community so that the guest room on the upper floor could be used by Jesus. Jesus is known just by the name the Teacher. So obviously there's relationships that the Gospels do not inform us about, that Jesus had made with the ownership of this location, and he's coming there for his Passover. Okay. Now, in section 213, we get Jesus washing the disciples' feet, and I want to read some of this with you. Now, before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of the world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. So here comes a demonstration of Jesus' love. During the supper, the devil, having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, and Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, rose from supper, okay, and laid aside his garments, taking a towel, girded himself about. Then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel which he had girded. All right, so most likely, Jesus began with Judas, the guest of honor. Jesus, who knew that Judas was about to betray him, washes his feet as an act of love. Love your enemies. Do good to those who abuse you, despitefully use you. He works his way around eventually and gets to Peter. Okay, and Peter says, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus says, what I do you do not realize now, but you shall understand hereafter. Okay. Peter says, you shall never wash my feet. Okay, now why would Peter respond that way? Well, our understanding was that if there was no servant to do the foot washing, as was the appropriate person to do it, the person in the lowest position of honor was to fulfill the role of the servant, and that would be Peter. Okay, so here's Jesus, who's obviously the person of honor, the master, doing the thing that Peter himself should have done. And Peter is embarrassed. No way, you're not going to wash my feet. Right? This is a little face-saving pride. And Jesus says, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me. Now, Jesus is not saying, if I don't wash your feet, you're no longer my disciple. Okay. Jesus is saying, if I don't regenerate you, if I do not cleanse you from your sins, you cannot be my disciple. But he says it in the context of washing feet because his feet washing was to symbolize what was already true about the disciples. That is, that they had been washed. Okay, where am I getting this? Well, Peter says, Lord, not my feet only, but my hands and my head. And Jesus says, no, he who has bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you. Now, if he was talking about feet washing, all their feet were clean. Okay? Not all of you are clean because he's referring to salvation, and Judas is the one who is not clean, even though his feet have been washed. Okay? So, what this teaches us about Jesus is that once again, we see him deliberately saying things that go in multiple directions at the same time. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll build it up, standing in the middle of the temple. Okay? He was going a different direction, but his words seem to refer this way. If I don't wash your feet, you have no part of me. Oh, wash all of me then. No, I appreciate Peter's enthusiasm. Jesus, I'm your disciple all the way, man. Head to toe. Wash me. And Jesus, no, Peter, you don't get it. I'm talking about being cleansed from sin. Okay. For he knew the one who was betraying him. For this reason he said, not all of you are clean. When he'd washed their feet, he said, do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that's what I am. If I then, the Lord and teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. Truly I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master. Neither is the one who sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Now, some have understood that Jesus was instituting a sacrament called foot washing here at this point. He's going to institute the Lord's Supper in just a moment. So the question is, should we be washing one another's feet? Well, first of all, let me say that I am sympathetic to those who understand this to be a sacrament. I do not think that it's a strange or outlandish conclusion to draw from the text. On the other hand, there's a key element that distinguishes the Lord's Supper from what Jesus does with foot washing. Okay? Does anybody know what that is? What distinguishes the symbolism of the Lord's Supper from the symbolism of foot washing? Well, he just said, if I then have washed your feet, you have to wash one another's feet.
That the Lord's Supper is supposed to be taken by people in right relationship to God.
That's true. That's not apparent here, since Jesus is going to feed Judas the Passover. Okay. The Passover gets transformed at this moment. It moves from a remembrance of the Exodus event to a remembrance of the crucifixion event. Okay, so we are looking at the transformation point. Okay, here's the essential difference that I see. The disciples needed their feet washed. Their feet were dirty. That's why Jesus washed their feet. Okay. The disciples did not need to be fed. That's not why he had the Passover meal. The Passover meal is not about meeting a need for food. In fact, Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 will say, would you guys just eat before you come to the Lord's table? Okay. If you're hungry, eat at home. That's not what we're doing when we come to the Lord's table. Okay. But foot washing was an act of service that had a real need as its focus. And that is why I have concluded that this is not something that we are to practice in its symbolism, or in its literal form, but in its symbolic form. Okay, the literal form would be for me to get down, take Amit's socks and shoes off, wash his feet. Okay. The symbolic form would be for me to say, how can I serve you? What can I do to help you? Okay. Now, having said that, I do not think that this is a ordinance, a sacrament that Jesus ordained and expects us to follow. He does expect us to be like our Master, and our Master is one who lowers himself to serve other people, who humbles himself in service. And that is to be true of us. Okay. If somebody's feet are dirty and need to be washed, by all means, wash them. Most of us, however, make it a point to keep our feet washed, and wearing shoes changes, unless you've been playing baseball, changes the need factor there. Okay? Maybe that'd be a good place to practice foot washing after a softball or baseball game. Anybody who's done that knows how dirty your feet are after playing that game. All right. Any questions about what I'm saying here? Yes.
This triclinium theory, how does it come from?
It's just common knowledge from the first century. It was the standard way in which Romans ate. Roman upper class people ate at tricliniums all the time. From rabbinic literature, we find and I think Josephus as well, that the poor were supposed to eat like the rich once a year, and that was Passover time. So I don't have extra biblical book, chapter, and verse for you, but it's considered common knowledge.
So did everybody just have three tables like this, in a closet or something, or where did they come from?
Well, I don't know that it had to be a table. It could have easily been a mat. Just lay the mat down in the shape, and you lay on your mat and reach out and grab it. Romans would have had pillows, that they would have laid on pillows, right? So they're not laying on the hard floor. But probably Jesus and his disciples did not have pillows.
Would be the center of the triclinium be the place where the master sits?
No, all the information that I've been able to acquire says that that's not the case.